Hi, I'm Jennifer Fortney, TiE DC's Executive Director. I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation of TiE DC's new reality and impact of COVID-19 on higher education. We have a number of great speakers lined up for you today. So with that, I'd like to welcome TiE DC's Chapter President, Sundi Natarajan. Sundi?
Good morning, all of you. A very warm welcome here from TiE DC. And I do see folks from India, so good evening to all of you. Before we get into an action-packed event where we have first a fireside chat between two presidents from Virginia Tech and from George Mason, followed with a panel from deans, provosts, investors who are going to be talking about higher education and the impact of COVID and what is going to unfold for all of us to get used to. But before this, I wanted to take a few minutes in going through the background of TiE and introduce TiE DC for folks who are new to this forum. Let me quickly share my screen here. So TiE has its roots, as most of you know, in the Silicon Valley, started about 30 years back. Now it's grown to over 14 countries and 61 chapters. And you name it, chapters are all in all cities in the US and also in UK, and a lot of chapters in India, Australia, New Zealand, you name it. And grown to over 13,000 members now, and with 3,000 charter members. And TiE is probably the largest not-for-profit now dedicated to fostering entrepreneurship. So at TiE DC, we have adopted 5 focus areas, 5 pillars where we get all our activities around, more to maximize the impact and optimize the way we reach out with our membership. The first one is the TiE DC GovCon. GovCon has been the flagship event for TiE DC for quite some time. We do this event in October. Last year, in spite of COVID, close to 400 people attended this. So what's unique about GovCon and what TiE DC brings to the TiE ecosystem here is it brings in 3 stakeholders. On one side, the federal government, CIOs and CTOs, procurement heads, small business administration, you name it, and bring them in front of all the cutting edge products, solutions, services that are offered by the TiE members and TiE charter members all across. And one thing that we have noticed is there is always a gap in terms of how new companies perceive doing business with the government. And we do have a lot of local DC based companies and entrepreneurs who are well versed in doing business with the government. They have the contract vehicles, they have the right kind of folks to go and do business development. So we bring all these 3 stakeholders together and maximize the impact in creating value for the ecosystem. So what kind of activities do we do here? One of the flagship activities is focused on bringing innovation into the capital beltway. We help scale and grow startups. When I say startups, these include beltway startups, which are companies that focus on the US federal government. We help them with funding. We help them with exits and M&A. More importantly, we also help them with the joint venture, mentor prodigies, and teaming, and a lot of other things that really make them successful. So this has been our flagship event, and we continue to plan around these. And in fact, this year we are getting an overwhelming response to making it even bigger in bringing in more chapters from all over the TiE into this particular event. Next, we have TiE DC Angels. As you know, this is all about helping entrepreneurs, creating a stage for them to come in and pitch, but more importantly, give them constructive feedback to go fix things and come back. And more importantly, the ecosystem is all about connecting the founders with not just capital, but then the local accelerators and other things that will really help them succeed. We do also mentoring clinics and mentoring programs called office service that really help them on a one-on-one basis with a lot of the TiE members here. Third, we have the diversity and inclusivity focus, where we help local women entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs, to help navigate through their first few years of journey in setting up the company, in getting the the first employee or whatnot. But this is all done through the successful entrepreneurs within the TiE community, the charter members who want to give back to this community. And last year, we also kicked off the free membership. So we do have membership that's free for folks from the D&I bucket. The next focus area is all about the young entrepreneur, TiE. This has been around for 10 plus years now, and we're very proud that we've impacted more than 400 high school students. So what do we do in this TiE? We run an 8-week boot camp every year, where high school students apply, and we pick the best students, motivated students to come in. But they spend these 8 weeks in completely learning from entrepreneurs. And in fact, it's driven by a curriculum that we have developed over the last few years and fine-tuned it. And it is focused on every single area that the students have to know, and finally actually build the prototype or get ready with their business plan. And we've seen lot of good outcomes out of this. And the best team that comes out of the TiE then qualifies and goes to the finals. That is hosted by the TiE Globals for prize money and whatnot. And I've personally seen a night and day difference in terms of the kids who come in and how they walk away after 8 weeks of the boot camp. The next pillar is a fairly new one, which we are kickstarting this year, thanks to the chair and co-chair, Ravi Puli and Mahesh Joshi, who've been driving this. This is a program for university students and graduates from 2019 and 2020. So what do these people get out of this? So it's absolutely no cost to these students, but then they get free mentoring, free coaching by TiE mentors. And we get about 5 or 6 teams and coach them. And finally, the best team wins the prize money. But then we also let this team go to the globals and participate for much bigger prize and hopefully investments. I think a few companies have picked up venture investments out of these things. The due date for submission is March 20th, 2021. So feel free to reach out to the chair and co-chair for more information. With that, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Array Information Technology. Thank you so much, Array. I also wanted to introduce Sumit Srivatsava, who is the president and CEO of Array Information Technology, to come over and introduce our speakers for the Fire Chat, President Sands and President Washington, and also our moderator, Pallavi Sabu. Over to you, Sumit.
Thank you, Cindy, for that kind introduction. So before we move on, my marketing folks have told me that I need to get our sponsor plug in. So here we go. Array provides a full spectrum of application solutions to the defense and public sector community. And this includes solutions in the areas of DevSecOps, cloud-based modernizations, waterfall to agile journeys, and of course, cyber. We have a mission-obsessed culture, and that merges technical expertise and deep client intimacy. So hopefully they give me a passing grade for that. I'm really excited and honored to help kick off this event. As someone who's benefited significantly from the promise of an education that has attracted so many immigrants to the US for generations, in my case, my parents over 50 years ago, this topic is central to my story. It includes a personal education journey that started in the Fairfax County school system in 1974, through my MBA at Mason, and significant learnings of which I've been able to avail in my career. And as a technology-based employer, the importance of the higher education system is core to the success of not only our workplace strategies, but frankly, those of every company that operates. Prior to COVID taking over our lives, there were already some major trends in higher ed that were being faced around the growth of non-traditional student demographics, corporate America's push towards certs and more workforce-ready curriculum, and of course, the high cost of degree pursuit that was often systemically shutting out large parts of our population. And in all of that, of course, the rise of the ed tech community and what it was enabling as alternatives to traditional degree pursuits, including the online and blended models of education. With COVID, many of these trends have only heightened the issues and often exposed some of these problems we face, not only with the traditional pedagogy, but with society as a whole. And so with that, I'm really excited to have the presidents of two of the universities within the Commonwealth that have been leading the way, and in many respects for the changes we need. As the two largest public universities in the Commonwealth, Virginia Tech and George Mason have been central to this region's prominence in numerous industries, and have been the primary drivers of the region's rise as a major national technology hub. And so with that, I'm honored to introduce our esteemed panel. President Sands is the 16th president of Virginia Tech, joining the university in June of 2014. A scientist, an educator, and inventor, he has dedicated much of his career to advancing the impact of research and innovation in public education. And as president, he's engaged the university community in a visionary plan to advance Virginia Tech's role as a global land-grant institution, confronting the Commonwealth's, the country's, and the world's most challenging problems. And in 2018, President Sands announced the creation of a 1 million square foot innovation campus in Northern Virginia to support the Commonwealth's economy with leading programs in computer science, software engineering, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. I know we'll be hearing more about that in just a few minutes. Before coming to Virginia Tech, President Sands served as Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and Provost of Purdue University, and he was also acting president during the summer and fall of 2012. He earned a bachelor's degree with highest honors in engineering physics and a master's degree and doctorate in material science from the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Dr. Sands. President Greg Washington became the 8th president of George Mason University this past July. And despite having only arrived at Mason recently, President Washington has already provided significant leadership and vision in areas such as anti-racism and inclusive excellence, Mason's innovation district plans for Arlington, and establishing relationships in the corporate community to support workforce development. He's the former dean of the Henry Samueli School of Engineering at the University of California, Irvine, and former interim dean of the College of Engineering at Ohio State University. And in his 7 years at Irvine, President Washington expanded undergraduate and graduate enrollment in the engineering school and recruited and hired one of the most diverse engineering faculty cohorts in the country. President Washington was the first African-American dean of engineering at any University of California campus, and is the first African-American president at Mason. A first-generation college graduate, he earned 3 degrees in mechanical engineering, including his PhD at North Carolina State University. Welcome, Dr. Washington. And finally, our moderator for this fireside chat is a fellow TiE DC board member and president-elect of the chapter. Pallavi Sabu is CEO of Harmonia Holdings Group, a federal government contractor headquartered in Blacksburg. Pallavi herself is a proud Hokie and has been honored as a lifetime Golden Hokie, a distinguished alumnus, and a member of the Uth Prosum Society. Pallavi and her spouse Jay also run a scholarship fund at Virginia Tech for deserving engineering students. She's an entrepreneur with a unique understanding of technology, as well as business and strategic issues, and serves on the boards of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, the Army Science Board, and NVTC's Executive Circle. Pallavi's been featured in Forbes magazine, Women Who Mean Business by the Washington Business Journal, a Fed 100 winner, and an Asian Business Leader of the Year. She's an electronics engineer and has an MBA with a specialization in marketing from Virginia Tech. So Pallavi, all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit, for such a wonderful introduction. It is a privilege for me personally and for TiE DC to host President Sands and President Washington today, who come together for the very first time on a social media platform today. I personally am closely connected to both universities. Virginia Tech is my alma mater and the alma mater for my entire family of my generation. And the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center was where my husband Jay and I incubated all 3 of our companies, with my current company Harmonia still headquartered there. On the other hand, my Northern Virginia office is located in the vicinity of GMU, and a lot of my top talent in Northern Virginia comes from GMU. So one university helped lay my foundation, and the other helped me successfully grow. With that, welcome President Sands, welcome President Washington. Since we only have 30 minutes, I'll jump straight into the questions. Nowadays, there's no conversation without discussing COVID-19. And who am I to break trend? So with that, my very first question is on COVID-19 itself. Presidents, the pandemic has changed our lives, especially the way we work and the way we study. We've seen that in the last year, and it seems it'll carry on for the foreseeable future. What changes do you think are needed in our higher education system to adapt to this new way of life? And how are you all planning for it? Let me start with President Sands and then move on to President Washington.
First of all, it's great to be with you and to be with my colleague, President Washington. I'll just mention a few things that jump out in terms of what will probably stick with us, the things that we've learned over the last year or so that really are permanent. It's not so much that we have a new understanding, it's a question of what trends that were already in place are going to be dramatically accelerated. I think one of the obvious changes going forward is going to be work from home. We have about 10,000 employees at Virginia Tech, and I would say about a quarter of them are going to end up working from home going forward permanently. Right now we have 55% working from home, but I think it's going to be 25%. Before the pandemic started, it was almost zero. So that is a major change in our operating mode. Universal access to broadband is absolutely essential. It was before the pandemic, but the pandemic just accelerated that. Dependent care is something we've learned that we need to pay more attention to. Certainly disparities in wealth, especially among our students, but also our faculty and staff and their access to resources that affected their experience through the pandemic. But getting more toward the academic side of things, high flex instruction is something that our faculty figured out how to do, meaning that they operate in multiple modes for students who are both in person, online, synchronous and asynchronous. And in some cases, they ran hybrid courses, and they learned a lot. And I think we learned what works and what doesn't. And I'm hopeful that some of that will be maintained and that we can promote that, because it allows some flexibility for the students and the faculty to be located somewhere else during a particular semester. Let's say they may be doing an internship or involved in community engagement or doing a research project somewhere else in the world, and can still keep up with their courses. And I think that's going to reduce the time to degree and enhance the experience. And just one last point, we did identify several things that can't be done online. They're just some undergraduate science labs, aspects of those are difficult to do. Some aspects of our research program, some experiential learning, and certainly some of the informal learning that just isn't done well online. So those are just a sense of what I've seen, and look forward to hearing what President Washington has observed. And so I'll turn it over to him.
Well, look, first of all, I'm honored to be here. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you today. It's great to follow President Sands on this, because many of the items that he's outlined are right in agreement with directions we're taking at Mason. Look, our institution and institutions in general in Virginia had to pivot literally on a dime. It's safe to say that we all were doing some level of online engagement. We all had some level of, on occasion, individuals working from home. We literally went to nearly 100% last year, right around this time, actually, maybe a month or two ahead, but about 11 months ago, and has since moved to a more balanced framework. And so right now, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 55 to 58% of our classes currently are online, with the remainder being face-to-face or some level of blended and hybrid education. Going forward, flexibility is the watchword. We will have some work from home framework, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30%. As it relates to our education, that number will be somewhere in the neighborhood. Hopefully, we're looking at a number between 25 and 40% in terms of a maintenance. We will not go fully online. To be honest with you, what we've learned is that for many of our students, it's not the best environment for their learning. Social interaction and engagement around learning is incredibly important. We've learned that. Look, I have two right now who are at universities, both at Ohio State. And even though my youngest had all of his classes online, I mentioned to him, why don't you consider just staying here this semester? You're taking all your classes online anyway. There's no need to go back to Ohio State and go to the dorms. And he looked at me with a very passionate look and said, I'd rather get COVID. And it, you know, in all kidding aside, his point was that there's much more to experience from a university relative to, in addition to its coursework. And we've actually learned that here. And we're seeing it in how students, when given the opportunity to take a class in person and online, the same class, we're seeing how students actually are making that choice. And so flexibility is going to be key to me in all of these areas. We want to provide a flexible environment for our students to take courses in person or online when they need to. We want to provide a flexible environment for our faculty and staff to teach and work in the same manner.
And you're right that college experience is a big part of learning. It's just not the textbook knowledge or even the lab knowledge, it's that human interaction with each other.
Exactly
With
right.
Yeah. With that, let me move to the next question, because both the universities are in the news every day regarding the Innovation District. What is your role? Tell the audience, please, in building this Innovation District and bringing innovation together in one place. And what is your role in supporting innovations for larger companies like Amazon that has just come in, and Google that is doubling its workforce here? And this time, President Washington, maybe we can put you on the hot seat first.
I get you. I get the hard one. Okay, so look, the reality of the situation is this one. We are living right now in the hottest growth area for technology in the country, and probably top 5 in the whole world. There is a reason why Amazon came here, followed by Google and Microsoft, and now even Apple is in discussions of coming. We look, you're looking at this confluence of need, some of it coming from the government, some of it coming organically from the large number of companies that make up the space in the whole DMV. And then you have, so you got large companies that are attracted to that. But what's being forgotten in this whole discussion is that there are a whole host of middle and small companies that are coming and locating here as well. Companies like MicroStrategy and Appian, Alarm.com and Cvent and Clarabridge. There are a host of them, many of which come out of Virginia, come out of the DMV, and they have been tremendously successful. Our job here is to support the whole ecosystem and to put in place mechanisms for that next generation of company. Look, this is the next big thing. As you know, if you look at what happened in Raleigh-Durham with the Research Triangle Park, if you look at what happened in the Boston area, you know, everyone goes back to Silicon Valley, but we forget that we actually, with what is happening here, we actually now have an opportunity to grow, to expand, and to create the next generation of tech advancement for the whole country. It's a really exciting thing. And at Mason, we have established our Institute for Digital Innovation and have identified some 15 different areas, from advanced communications to machine learning, quantum computing, even down to blockchain and IT policy, in terms of areas where we believe that we can significantly impact and help this growing area and help these companies grow.
Yeah, I would echo everything that President Washington said. The opportunity is tremendous, and our two institutions, along with all those that we partner with, by ourselves will not solve the talent needs. But one thing we can do, I think, is create a vibrant, innovative ecosystem and contribute to that will attract talent from all over the world. So it's not just the students we graduate, but it's the opportunity to really make this region exciting and a place that that everyone wants to come to. And that's, I think, in the long run, what we're going to achieve. I can give a quick overview of how we got to where we are, and I won't take too long at this, but it's kind of an interesting story. Virginia Tech had decided on a principle that I brought to Virginia Tech called the binary star, which I thought was a clever name. It didn't stick, but the idea was that a modern land grant university ought to be both urban and rural. And one of the things that attracted me to Virginia was the opportunity in the more urban parts of Virginia, even though our main campus was out in Blacksburg. We've been in Northern Virginia for 50 years, but not at scale. And so back in 2015, we got hundreds of people together to design a global innovation district for Northern Virginia. We just didn't have the money, and we didn't know where it would be, and we didn't know when. But we had the designs in the box, so to speak. And when the opportunity in 2017 came up to compete for Amazon HQ2, we just jumped in because we were ready and supported the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. And there were various stages along the way as we went from 200 down to 20 sites, and there were 3 sites eventually that looked promising in Virginia and one in Maryland and DC. And the Greater Washington Partnership brought us together. I give them a lot of credit for the foresight that they had to get all of our institutions together and write a letter to Amazon saying that if one of us wins, we all win. And then National Landing came about. Arlington, Alexandria ended up as the front runner. And what Virginia did, which was really smart, is to focus on a parallel MOU called the Tech Talent Investment Program. And that is a commitment over $1 billion over 20 years to double the tech talent output of our universities. And actually, that's, we talk about the footprint that GMU and Virginia Tech will have in Northern Virginia, already have, but the growing footprint that President Washington alluded to. And some of the resources are going to that, but a lot of it is going to doubling the tech talent output from all of our universities and creating feeder systems and interconnections and articulation agreements that will allow us to stack master's degrees in computer science and software engineering and computer engineering on top of bachelor's degrees from any field. And I think that's really exciting. The state gave us, Virginia Tech gave us a commitment for $250 million to build the VT Innovation Campus in North Potomac Yard. And we pledged to raise $250 million in private money. And so far we've got $50 million in the door and are ahead of pace because the interest is so great. So I think between George Mason and Virginia Tech, we can get things started and get them accelerated, but it's going to be a lot bigger than that. It's really, as President Washington was alluding to, it's not just Amazon, of course, it's not just the big companies, it's the startup environments, the mid-sized companies, it's the scaling companies, and we're excited to be part of that ecosystem.
Let me put you both on the hot seat because I'm going to speak from a small business perspective, and the governor and the senators and NVTC's Bobby Kilberg and Jennifer all know that this is a pain point companies my size struggle with. Like you mentioned Clara Bridge, Alarm.com and Harmonia fall in the same ballpark. We find that the younger generation gets attracted to these larger brand names. I cannot steal a person away from Microsoft or from Google or from Amazon. They want to go work there. That's where the romance is in their eyes. And for companies like us, the paradigm is suddenly shifted. First, it was how do I win a government contract? Because DC is mostly about federal contracting. Now it seems it's easier for us to win the contract. The bigger thing that keeps me up and other CEOs like me up is how am I going to staff it? How am I going to service the contract? I can recruit people. Every person we know will have resumes out many places. But the minute Amazon or Google gives them an offer, they'll be out the door. Even though they are not a number in a company like mine, and they might be a number and they might only stay a couple of years in these larger companies, it's a challenge. So I know you've talked about the 20-year horizon, both of you. What about today? We still got to survive. I still have to service my next few contracts in the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10-year horizon. So President Sands, let me put you in the hot seat first with this pain point question coming from my heart.
Well, we certainly heard that pain point as soon as the Amazon announcement was made. Everyone was concerned about how this would impact the ecosystem in the short and mid-term. I think everybody understands in the long run this is going to be good, but how do we get through the next several years with the tech talent challenge? We've got a few things going on that I think are working. One is a lot of our companies have realized, and Harmonia is one of them, that you do need to be at both the source and the concentration of talent. So it is great to be have a presence where the talent is concentrated. In a lot of cases, that's Northern Virginia, especially in the tech arena. But it's not exclusively, but a lot of it's there. But you also want to have a presence with the source, and for us, that's the Blacksburg area. And for GMU, they've got locations throughout Northern Virginia that could serve in that role. And it's not just about being co-located; it's about having joint programs, running internship programs or apprenticeship programs with our students so that they have a sticky pathway to your company. And I think a lot of companies are starting to realize that. We're seeing more and more interest in these more engaged internships, not summer internships, but multi-year, really authentic experiences for our students. And it works. They may not stay with your company, but there's a good chance they will. And there's a good chance they'll stay in the ecosystem. The other thing I'll just mention that we're working hard on what 4+1 programs, where we work with our essentially our universities around the state to create pathways where you have a 4-year bachelor's degree in any field with a capstone at the master's level in computer science or computer engineering. And we've got 5 universities signed up already for that. And that's going to broaden the talent pool considerably. So there's no one solution to it, but as I mentioned it in my opening comment, I think that the longer term is really to create a vibrant tech community that will attract talent from all over the world to the DC metro area. And I think we're okay at that, but there's a lot more we can do. We're still not quite if you talk to a graduate from Stanford or Berkeley or Virginia Tech or George Mason for that matter, they're going to be looking at places like San Francisco and Austin, and they're going to be looking around North Carolina, Research Triangle, and they're going to be comparing. We've got to be more attractive, not just from the job prospects, but the quality of life and the arts and diversity and things that talent looks for. So, and the K through 12 school system, affordability, transportation, go down. Those are I think as important as the number of students we graduate.
So just I don't want to repeat anything that Tim said. I'm actually in agreement with all of it, but I will follow up with a couple of items. Look, companies must have presence amongst our students. And so we have a whole host of initiatives that we're putting in place here in Northern Virginia that give companies that level of presence. Meaning, what do I mean? They really need to know you and have some engagement with you before the time you will hire them in graduation. And so internships were mentioned. We can actually go beyond that. Student projects, just being present. And so what we're trying to do now is embrace and put our arms around many of the small and medium companies in this area and tell them, here's how you can come in contact and embrace us with our students. You can't afford to wait on the back end. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're not, only a few large companies can do this. Google can do it. Amazon can do it. Maybe a couple of others. But there are some large companies in our space that can't afford to wait until the students graduate either. They actually have to have a level of involvement from day one. This will not only be better for the company, here's the deal, it's actually better for the student. Mm-hmm. We want as many students as possible involved in internships, involved in doing student projects, involved in having engagements with companies, literally beginning as early as possible, sophomore year in particular on, so that by the time they graduate, they have some familiarity. The other piece is we're also working with companies now to get students cleared early. So those who need security clearances we can actually start that process in their junior year. We can start that process now in in their sophomore year if they're working with a company. And so those kinds of programs, in my opinion, are the kinds of solutions that smaller and middle tier companies have. There's one other piece that I would like to add here, and that's a plug for the partnerships that we've developed, and I know that Virginia Tech is developing as well with our community colleges, right? I don't think people realize the pipeline, the level of pipeline shortage that we're going to experience short, medium, and long term if we don't get this right. We have the advanced program right now. There are more than 3,000 Mason students in that program. Those students can do a couple of years at a community college, and through rigorous articulation agreements, they can transfer into Mason, graduate with no loss of time, and at a substantially less cost. And the idea is now to add corporate partnerships as a part of that process, as a part of that sojourn. Many of these students are they're older students, so they have some work experience. Some of them have some military experience. They've come out of the military, and so we have a nice pathway that we believe that can be extended throughout the whole state, not just in the Northern Virginia space. And then if you add to that, Mason manages all of the small business development centers in the state of Virginia. There's more than 33 of them, and they're all over, even way out in Lee County. We have facilities out there. Look, and the idea here is that while there are jobs and opportunities focused here in Northern Virginia, we think we can use those centers to be a key rallying point in terms of focusing the whole state on opportunities. Just like you can be virtual and do work in Northern Virginia from anywhere on the planet, you can definitely do that work from companies and entities in Southeast, in Northeast, in Southwest Virginia as well.
You're right on, sir. So with that, I'll do a shameless plug-in for what TiE just started. We started TiE University because our ecosystem, which is small to mid-sized companies in our membership, felt we needed to connect with the universities sooner. And if we have this entrepreneurship program, which TiE is known for, and engage these students early on in their college curriculum, they'll get to know these companies and may be interested in joining them. It's actually headed and chairpersoned by your own GMU professor, Dr. Mahesh Joshi. So he'll have to pay me he'll pay me after this for the shameless plug-in. But the other question, which is very pertinent, and I see that being a federal contractor, and federal is important because most of the businesses here are in the federal space. Diversity is important in the workforce, we know that. But the IT workforce has an opposite diversity problem. We see a lot of Indians, Israelis, Brazilians, other nationalities come into the IT workforce, and they are H1 people. That's a problem on three fronts. It's very hard to get them cleared. Second, the regulations change often on H1s. We had a different set of regulations in the previous administration. It might change now. And it becomes very hard to juggle that. Third, the processing fee for a smaller sized company. I mean, Harmonia has several H1, and I wish I didn't have all that cost associated with it. So the question I'm leading to is, how can we target more citizens to follow the IT curriculum? My daughter is a computer science graduate, but I know most of her friends did not want to go in the maths and sciences. Even it was a pure pressure of, I don't want to go in it, even though I'm naturally inclined. How do we make it, or how are you planning to make it more attractive to the citizens, or if that is even a concern that's being addressed at the back end?
Oh, it is. Let me tell you, this is one where I've been intimately involved in for years. It's not a short-term problem. And companies tend to get engaged at the point of when they need the employee. Mm-hmm. Our outreach programs are now asking companies, let's get engaged with sixth graders, right? We need to take care of your problem 8 to 10 years from now. And it's incredibly important that we fix the pipeline, and that is a community problem. It's not a university by itself that can solve it, but we can have substantial impact on this problem. And I have personally established STEM ecosystems across the country, and a big one in Southern California that did exactly that. You can increase the number of students in the pipeline, and it takes some time, but in 4 to 5 years, we can put in place a mechanism where we can dramatically increase the number of students pursuing STEM degrees. That's what has to happen. And I was amazed to find how much opportunity there is still here in the state of Virginia, in the DMV area in general, in terms of helping to grow that pipeline. And also, in my opinion, also will help us connect more to women and more to members of underrepresented groups. You know, part of the reason why we have such a big problem here is because women represent 50%, well, greater than 50% of our population, and they're underrepresented dramatically in the IT realm. So you already start with more than half of your population that aren't being engaged. And then in addition to that, when you couple that with Latinx populations and African-American populations, which are also underrepresented, there's only a small pool that's actually being currently engaged at high levels. We need a massive outreach initiative that's corporate, that's university, that's non-governmental organizations that will reach into our high schools, and particularly Title I high schools, to focus these students towards this outcome. Look, 85% of our gross domestic product, 85% is attributed to STEM. And only 6% of our graduates, 6% of our graduates are flowing out of a pipeline in a crucible in that area. This has got to be flipped. And it's going to take a massive re-education and retraining effort in order to do it. That being said, there are communities across the country that are impacting this dramatically. I've worked with some of them, and I want to bring that expertise here.
President Sands, Virginia Tech is headquartered in a rural area. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with everything President Washington said, and we're so lucky to have him and his experience in building up those pathways here in the Northern Virginia area. He's joined by a new colleague of ours, Lance Collins, who's the vice president and executive director of our innovation campus. And just like President Washington, Lance was a dean of engineering at Cornell in his case, for 10 years before he joined us in Alexandria. And he is committed to, and the university, of course, is supportive of the innovation campus becoming the most diverse grad tech campus in the country. And that is a top level goal for Lance, but it's also aligned with what we're doing in Blacksburg. We have started this many years ago to build up the pipeline to STEM and to diversify it, because as President Washington was saying, there's a whole pool of talent that hasn't accessed that opportunity, and it's not for a lack of desire. A lot of times it's financial, sometimes it's a lack of peer pressure in the positive direction, and sometimes just lack of knowledge. And so we've been reaching out to our high schools, and it's starting to make a difference. We now have nearly 5,000 underrepresented minority undergraduates on our campus in Blacksburg, and that may surprise people who haven't been there in a while. It's a 40% increase over the last 5 years. And in our part of it is due to the Black College Institute and Hispanic College Institute, both of which have really built up our pipeline from all over Virginia into our STEM programs. This fall, we have 42,000 applications for undergraduate admission, and there's a 75% increase in those who identify as Black or African American, 47% in first gen. And so we're seeing that really positive signals from lots of years of hard work. And I think working together with President Washington, and I think we're and with our community colleges and the K through 12 system, I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to create the most diverse tech workforce in the U.S. in a number of years. I think we'll get there. One little quick story: when we announced our innovation campus 2 years ago, that day we were inundated with interest from the K through 12 systems in the region, especially Alexandria city schools, and we've been building partnerships with them. And I look forward to seeing what we can do with the region's school districts. And I think there's a lot of potential, a lot of upside, and a lot of excitement. So I guess my conclusion is that I'm optimistic. We've got to work hard on all these fronts over the next several years to really lock that in. And if we can do that, if we can create the most diverse tech workforce in the country, it will be a positive feedback mechanism. We will see talent from all over flowing in. So that is a high level priority.
Thank you. I am being pinged that the time is up. I have several more questions, but I'm going to get you both back on another panel, maybe for the Asian Chamber of Commerce. But if you have a chance, if you look at the chat, at your convenience, do answer those questions. But it's been an honor. Thank you so much for making time. I'll hand it over to Sundi now to take us into the next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pallavi, for moderating a great fireside chat with President Sands and President Washington. Now on to our next program. We're very fortunate to have a team of very distinguished panelists to talk about the new reality and impact of COVID-19 on US higher education. What more can we ask? Between the panelists, they bring deep knowledge of higher education, from being dean to vice provost, to actively driving research, to teaching, to being thought leaders, and also helping the Obama and the Biden administration in the areas of science and technology, to starting ventures, non-for-profits, and also funding and scaling companies. With that, let me first introduce Dr. Reena Agarwal. Reena specializes in domestic and global financial markets and market regulation, and she combines rigorous data-driven scholarship with deep knowledge of institutional workings and regulation of the financial markets. Until recently, she was a vice provost for faculty at Georgetown University, and prior to that, she was an interim dean of the business school. She deeply cares about diversity and equity and played a leading role on the Presidential Task Force on General Equity. She serves on multiple corporate boards, including Cohen & Steers, New York Life Investment Management, Index IQ, and won numerous awards, including the one that was the Outstanding Faculty in the Business Week Guide. She also has won a Distinguished Alumni Award from BITS Pilani. We share the same alma mater. So with that, welcome, Reena. Next, we have Vijay Kumar, is the Nembrowski Family Dean of Penn Engineering, with appointments in Department of Mechanical Engineering and Applied Mechanics, Computer and Information Science, and Electrical Systems Engineering at UPenn. He received his bachelor's from IIT Kanpur and PhD from Ohio State University. In addition to holding a lot of administrative positions at Penn, Vijay also served as the Assistant Director of Robotics and Cyber Physical Systems at the White House of Science and Technology Policy during the Obama administration. His lab has founded many startups in robotics, and he is the founder of Exin Technology. He's been a startup guy and with multiple startups that he's been involved with. So with that, Vijay, please welcome on board. Next, we have Anant Agarwal, who is the founder and CEO of edX and professor of electrical and engineering computer science at MIT. Anant has won numerous awards. Just to name a few, is MIT's Mellon and Jamieson Prize for teaching, and prior to that, the recipient in 2016, the Harold McGraw Jr. Prize for higher education, which recognized his work in advancing the MOOC movement. As CEO of the global not-for-profit, Anant is helping to transform traditional education, removing the barriers of cost, location, and access. edX is reimagining the possibilities of education, providing highest quality, stackable learning, and the groundbreaking MicroMasters program, which he's very, very passionate about. He's also the recipient of Padma Shri Award from the President of India. With that, welcome, Anant. Then we have Frank. Frank Bonsall is a pioneer in the field of education, innovation, technology, and investment, and has demonstrated sustained empathy for education end user. As managing partner of Bonsall Capital and former general partner of New Markets Venture Partners and an angel investor, he's invested in over 30 education companies so far. And more importantly, all these companies have positively impacted millions and millions of education and learners. With that, I want to invite Frank on board. Frank is also serving on the board of TiE. Last but not the least, we have the moderator, Sumit Srivatsava, who's a very, very passionate about education. He is the president and CEO of Array, an application service provider to the US defense and public sector marketplace. Sumit has been passionate about the importance of education in uplifting individuals and communities, and has been committed to his alma mater, George Mason University, and the regional community throughout his career. He is currently on the GMU Foundation Board of Trustees and the president of Mason's Alumni Association, including the endowment scholarship, which is focused on diversity and inclusion. In addition, besides his position on being a board member at TiE, he's been very, very actively involved on the board of Children's Science Center, an effort to build the first science museum in the Northern Virginia, and which is expected to break ground in 2022, fulfilling its mission to inspire a lifelong love for informal STEM learning. With that, over to you, Sumit.
All right. Well, thank you, Cindy, and thank you to the panelists for joining us today. We just heard the university president's fireside chat and some of their thoughts on overall trends, regional, national issues around workforce development, reskilling, upskilling, et cetera. And prior to COVID taking over our lives, there were already some major trends in higher ed that were being faced around the growth of non-traditional student demographic, corporate America's push towards certs and more workforce-ready curriculum, and of course, the high cost of degree pursuit that was often systemically shutting out parts of our population. And in all of that, of course, there's been this rise of the ed tech community and what it was enabling as alternatives to traditional degree pursuits, including the online hybrid push. So clearly, with the background of this panel in particular, we'd like to hit on some of these topics, but I'd like to start with having each of you spend a few minutes speaking to your and your organization's experience of the last 9-10 months and how you've coped, things that you saw accelerating some of these changes, and maybe things even that you had to put on hold due to this new normal. And so with that, Rena, I'd love to start with you and hear about what you all were doing at Georgetown. And if you could also, some of how that may have influenced what you did as part of your role with the Biden-Harris transition team.
Yep. Thank you, Sumit, and thank you, Cindy, for organizing this very timely and important event. So I think so I'm coming at this from a couple of different hats on. I was until recently vice provost for faculty at Georgetown, and have been in academia for a long time. At the same time, I serve on a couple of corporate boards. I have sort of the business angle of things. And I think one of the biggest challenges that higher ed, certainly in the United States, is facing has to do with how do you bring down the cost of higher education? How do you make higher education available to all parts of our society? And COVID has really made these issues worse instead of better in any way. So I think we really have to figure out, how do you take higher ed to all stratas of society? How do you bring down the costs of higher ed? And what's that's going to mean? I know we have parents in the audience, potential parents in the audience whose kids will be going to college, and we have entrepreneurs. And each group needs to be thinking about this in addition to those of us in higher ed. I think this will have implications for college admissions, standardized tests, all kinds of things like that. It will have implications for private-public kinds of partnerships, and we can go into the details of that later on. The other thing that COVID really brought home was the challenges that our faculty face. Now, typically, we have 3 groups of faculty at a university. We have the tenured faculty, full-time tenured faculty. Then there is the full-time non-tenure line faculty, and then there are part-time faculty. And different groups have faced different challenges and some similar challenges. How do we address those challenges in education? So the issues of racial inequity, the issues of worker enforcement, all of this is going to be pretty key as we address some of our challenges. So we can dig deeper later on.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Vijay, in your role as a dean, and I just spoke to, the challenges of faculty, you really are at the nexus of sort of enterprise strategy with the execution. And I imagine you saw these impacts very directly with faculty, staff, students, even corporate engagement and alums. What short and long-term impacts did you see in these communities from your 2020 and now 21 experience?
Thank you, Sumit. Well, let me just first say that I think, COVID-19 was, of course, a crisis moment for all of us. But it was also an experiment at a grand scale, a global experiment that we could never imagine conducting. And so there are a lot of findings from that, right? So let me just share two things that struck me. So first, I think conclusively, we've seen that science and engineering matter, right? So this is not something that's a given. It matters whether you look at developing vaccines, low-cost testing, or for the virus or for the antibodies. It's all about science and engineering coming together. And I think this is now translating into this trifecta of climate, energy, and sustainability. And this is energizing people thanks to COVID in a strange way. I think the other thing we conducted this experiment on is, can we take things from an in-person experience to online? And the answer is yes. So there is now increasingly this teach from home culture, study from home culture. And many of us believed that this was possible. But if you look at my faculty, maybe 10% of our faculty were believers and they were doing this. But all of a sudden now, over a period of 8 months, I think 90% are believers. We all see the benefits of going online. I think you can connect with students in a remarkable way. You literally enter people's living rooms. They enter your living rooms, and suddenly teaching, interaction between faculty and students is humanized. It's very personal at a way that you really never do in a classroom. And I think the benefit from that is not just that we can become better teachers, but I think the barrier to deliver education, the barrier to learn comes down. And yes, I know there are many disadvantaged students who don't have access to good internet. They may not have laptops. The home environment might not be conducive, but those are things we know how to solve. So if you solve those, I mean, the fundamental barrier is a high cost of moving to a city, living in a city, in our case, Philadelphia, staying in dorms, all of that, you don't have to do that. So we've actually proved that this is possible. And once you flip this switch going from in-person to online, I think there's no coming back in a full way to in-person education. So I think that's the opportunity. I will say that there is one weakness that this experiment highlighted, which and this is particularly true for an engineering school, where we pride ourselves in teaching hands-on skills and conducting experiments in the real world. And we like to think that in an era where everything relies now on computing and large-scale data sets, the cloud, well, doing labs in a virtual way is really, really hard. The infrastructure for virtualizing labs, laboratory experiments for students to build things, well, bits and pieces of it are there. Actually, to do it at scale is really hard. So the question we've been asking ourselves now is, what's the right investment in the private cloud infrastructure that might be tied to physical experiments, and then the public cloud, of course, that people can access remotely. And so this is an interesting way to think about labs, about distributing resources. And that's, again, an opportunity as we think about what COVID has taught us going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, I know that time at the White House that you had with the Office of Science and Technology is, you kind of referenced that. It's interesting how that is coming back at the forefront, and we are seeing that, and it's good to see that. You just talked about online, cloud, and whatnot. So Anant, I want to turn to you. I rewatched your 2013 TED Talk on MOOCs, and I remember there was this description, and so it obviously hit home for me last night. We were talking about the blended learning, and specifically, you made some reference about how in the future people could be in their dining room. I think you even said bathroom, wherever, to be able to in effect engage. And I was thinking you were not only prescient about MOOCs, but certainly about our 2020 experience. So would love to hear about how edX has managed and adapted this year, and what you've seen helping either accelerate or adapt your strategy.
Well, first of all, First of all, thank you, Sumit and Sundi, for inviting me here. I am a huge fan of TiE, and it's just such a pleasure for me to be a part of this conversation. edX is an online learning provider, of course. We partner with some of the top institutions in the world, including many of the institutions of the panelists here, Georgetown, Penn, Vijay, taught a course, several courses on edX and robotics, as a world expert in robotics. We have about 37 million learners learning on edX. But what is interesting is when COVID hit, what was a stream suddenly became, it was as if someone poured gasoline on the fire of online learning. The whole world went to online learning. And in fact, when COVID first hit the Americas in particular, we found during April, we found that the number of new students, learners from all over the world coming to edX went up tenfold. Not 10%, but 10x. In fact, in the month of April, we had 5 million new registered learners on edX. This equaled the entire number of new learners that came to edX in the year 2019. So we did more for the world in 1 month than in all of 1 year. And what was interesting was we took a survey of our learners to say, why are you coming and learning in such big numbers at this time? 38% of them told us that they had more time on their hands. I myself, we are working remotely at edX ourselves. And I save 2 hours a day from commuting on the Mass Pike to Cambridge every single day. So this has given me 2 hours every single day of my life. And so a lot of people find more time on their hands, and 38% are coming because they want to learn something new. 35% of the people are coming for the same old reason they came to edX before, which is they're working in companies or they're in college and they want to upskill and earn new skills. About 15% have been furloughed or have been laid off, and they want to get new skills using short pieces of learning so that when the pandemic is over, they can come out stronger. So come out stronger is a phrase we're hearing more and more. And about 12% are learners that are in colleges. They've had to go home, and they're finding ways to increase their learning experiences. So as you can see, there's a broad swath of interest. And my belief is that in the future, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, the world is not, even from in-person experiences at universities or corporate training, we are not going to go back to 100% in person. I believe the future of learning is blended, whether it's 50-50, which is 50% online, 50% in person. It's hard to say, but I believe that the future of learning in universities or in corporate training centers is going to be blended, which is going to be a mix of the best of in-person and the best of online. I don't think there is any looking back as we go post-COVID.
Absolutely. Thank you. And just to close this part out, we definitely will pull some threads on that and going forward. But Frank, just giving you an opportunity. Obviously, edX is an example of ed tech and really in some ways disrupting some of the historical ways that delivery has occurred. But as an investor, you've been in over 25 companies, ed tech companies over the last 20 years. Can you speak to what you saw happening amongst your portfolio investment and the ed tech space in general?
Sure, Sumit, thank you, and TiE DC, thank you. I'm proud to be a TiE DC board member, and very involved in the sort of the startup ecosystem here in the National Capital Region. My perspective has been through a portfolio of investments across time. We actively have about 11 companies that we're directly invested in today. We have some indirect investments in funds, diverse emerging managers, most of which are also here in the National Capital Region. And so we take a lens of equity and a lens of impact. The impact in the last year has been that things have been turned upside down, that the lives of the stakeholders of higher education have been changed dramatically, every single stakeholder. Some more than others. And so through our portfolio investments, the pragmatic approach has been, okay, do we have a solution that you need? Because if it's not core to your needs, we're going to go away. And so fortunate enough to be involved with a couple of companies, one on online course design, where obviously the world has gone online, and bringing facility to online course development and design is pretty important. And so this is a seed stage company that's based here in the region called CourseArc. They've done a really nice job. I will say that both examples are B2B business models where they're dealing with an institution directly. They've had some departmental solutions. Those have gone by the wayside because departments are scattered to the wind. And so it's really finding the signal from the noise in terms of communicating with an institution saying, we can help you through this, and increasing that partnership, whether it's a new partnership or whether it's existing. Because even if it's existing, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay in this kind of environment. And so the other company is an experiential learning company, so focused on that future of work, that pathway solution for higher ed institutions, and is a little more mature, still kind of late seed stage from a venture perspective. But they had a departmental solution that they basically have almost sunset, and they're dealing now with the whole of an institution and providing opportunities for students to dabble in areas that they wouldn't be able to get on campus because they're not on campus. And so I think that's really the key takeaway for me is the acuteness of value is paramount. Everything else is ancillary. And if it's a nice story, it's a nice story, but can you help me now or in the next month? And if you cannot, let's talk in 6 months or in 12 months.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's so, for this next round, you each have talked about what I would term convergence in some ways of all the different methods of delivery, right? And so, and with each of your representative views, whether it's the traditional academic institution or, a newer capability set, I'd like to see if we could dialogue a little bit, but also basically start with individual commentary on what you've seen as the impact from the perspective of the content delivery mechanism, the people who are delivering that education, curriculum pathways, methods, and what you see as the trend and impacts there. And so, Rena, if representing your side, maybe start with you.
Sure. So I completely agree with everything that Vijay and Anand said and Frank said in terms of what's the value. So we're not going back to where we were 5 years ago or even pre-COVID, but I must say that we've also learned the value of social interaction, how much students value that, how much parents value that, how much our faculty value that, right? So when this happened in March 2020, it was like, okay, let's quickly get online. But as time is passing, people are getting more and more antsy about, I want to be there in person, because a lot of education takes place in the classroom, but there's a lot that takes place outside the classroom. And so there is going to be a part that's going to have a lot of value added in person. And there are going to be lots and lots of parts, whole degrees that don't need to be in person, right? And so just trying to figure out what works, what model works for what type of education. And COVID has just accelerated so many changes in higher ed, right? So we're used to thinking about a major. I'm a finance major. I'm majoring in mechanical engineering. I think that's going to be irrelevant in a few years, right? It's going to be not just what you're majoring in, but what are all these certificates that you've picked up from edX? How have you educated yourself in a much more wholesome way? And technology is changing so fast. Even in my area of finance, it's not the same as it used to be 10 years ago. The kids used to think they all want to go into investment banking. Now there's fintech, There is combining innovation, technology, doing good. And so along the way, when they have time, they're picking up courses from edX and other places, including me. I'm picking up Anant, your courses. So I think there is going to be this need for in-person for some part of education, and some parts can go online and some parts will be hybrid. And COVID has really helped us think about what's needed. Plus, I also think the whole 4-year degree is, we've got to really rethink that. Our students now at any stage, they want flexibility, right? Why can't I move at my own pace? Why do I have to go through this structure? So we really have to figure out how to provide that flexibility, and why does it need to be a 4-year undergrad degree? And can I do it in bits and pieces in different ways?
Hey,
So
Sumit,
Anant had a visceral reaction. Please go.
thank you. If you will allow me to
Absolutely.
back on the comment that Reena made. Reena, I just cannot tell you how strongly I agree with you. You know, I joke that when I went to IIT Madras and graduated in 1982. At that time, it was a 5-year program. And there was conversations at that time to say, hey, look, let's turn this 5-year program into a 4-year program. And all the faculty and students were up in arms saying, oh my God, you know, hell will break loose. This is the downward slide of IIT. But guess what? IIT went from 5 years to 4 years. And you know what? This was 30 years ago. Things are fine. Nothing, the whole world does not come to an end. So then we have to ask the following question. Why 4 years? Why not, you know, if you want the learning experience or the campus experience, why not 2 years on campus? Why not spend, for example, why not spend 1 year learning online with modular programs like micro bachelors or micro masters, earn short credentials, stack them up, go to college for a couple of years for the college experience, and then go get a job and continue learning through modular programs and keep stacking up credit, and you eventually get a degree down the line. Why don't we think of these new modular stackable approaches that really encourage lifelong learning? So why should all learning have to happen between 18 and 22 on a campus? I see no reason why that should be the case.
Yeah, so Anant, I completely agree with you, but at the same time, then universities have to think about how to reinvent ourselves, right? And how will the business model work, right? How do you monetize different things? So there are a lot of questions that have to be figured out.
Absolutely. You know, I think people have to move fast, because if you look at other industries, if the incumbents who are leading do not figure it out, they will get disrupted. So I think it's critical for us universities. Look, I teach at MIT. So it's critical for us as professors and universities to be thinking fast, because otherwise we are going to get disrupted by external forces.
Absolutely. Vijay, I don't know if you want to step in. I was going to try to connect the dot because you did talk earlier about.
There's some, I mean, we agree with us so much. So let me just be a contrarian just a little bit here. But first, let me start by expressing my violent agreement with everything that's been said. I think the online world has taught us how to create, I mean, the 4 words I use, similar to Anant, is modular, stackable, and then customizable, and then scalable, right? So to me, those are the powerful things. And I do believe that students can fashion their own curricula. They can choose to pursue what they want to pursue. And, you know, I'm in a liberal arts institution, and that's the essence of a liberal arts. You want this broad base, you want skills that transfer to the real world, and you pick and choose those skills. That's great. But I think it requires a certain level of maturity for students to do that. And we have to remind ourselves that universities not only provide education. Actually, if you look at how universities like Penn or Georgetown or MIT spend money, yes, it's on education, but there are lots of other things that we do to socialize students, to provide an environment where they can grow up in. And that's where the online world today has not served us well. So if you look at incoming freshmen or even incoming graduate students, they enter a community for the first time. And paradoxically, getting to know each other online seems to be much harder than getting to know each other in person. And the reason I say paradoxically, because we know in social media, there are huge uprisings that happen. You get to know people because you're united behind similar causes. And of course, there are positives and negatives associated with that, but we know it's possible. But for whatever reason, and I admit this experiment has not been carried out for a long time, we've not seen that happen on campus. So, and I think, and Rena also alluded to this briefly, I think if you're a minority student, you're more likely to suffer from this. And I think there's something very reassuring at being in a classroom, I hate to use that old-fashioned term, but with people that are all there because, let's say, you want to learn history or mechanical engineering, and then getting to know each other and then saying, wait a minute, I didn't think of that. Maybe I should take courses in computer science. And those kinds of interactions, I think, happen for whatever reason, seem to happen more naturally in an in-person environment. Not to say you can't do it in an online environment. Right now, I don't think it happens. I think the other deficiency I see is that, so I think we understand the online world very well. And I remember one of my early conversations to Anand, he used to tell me that you get to know your students even better online than you do in a large classroom. And he's absolutely right, because you get to know who is studying your material, how much time that person has spent on the material. And unlike a classroom where I don't see anybody except the first 10 students or the first 20 students or the person who raises their hand, in the online world, I see everyone. So it allows me to be a better teacher, and hopefully it allows students to interact better with me. That's the benefit. The in-person world, we've agreed, has lots of shortcomings, and we're not likely to go back to that fully, but we don't know how to bridge these worlds. So we've seen many campuses now that are in this hybrid model, and I think this hybrid model where you're simultaneously teaching to an online world and an on-campus world, a combination of asynchronous and synchronous, I don't think the students get a good experience. And quite honestly, we don't know how to do that. So when I say we don't know how to do that, I think to me, that's a big opportunity, because it's clear we'll never go back to the fully in-person world. And for folks who are thinking about innovations in education, edtech investments, and so on, I don't know what the right platforms are and how to unify the in-campus, on-campus world with the online world.
He brought up EdTech. Frank, is there something you want to kind of talk to, or things that you're seeing from your side?
Well, the only thing I would say, which is sometimes challenging for higher education, is that the pandemic has created an opportunity to test and learn. And so those institutions that have done some of that, that have tested various pedagogies, various platforms, and data-driven analyses, those are the ones that are going to come out better on the other side. That probably also creates some inequities in terms of institutional upside. So I guess I have a previous investment in a company called Straighterline that was and is a disruptor in basically gen ed coursework. And the challenge with institutions is gen ed coursework is where you can extract a lot of margin because you can get a lot of students into a course, hence top line, bottom line scenarios. This is not a finance panel, but at the end of the day, institutions are going to have to figure out how to create flexibility around the early part of education and the latter part of education, both undergrad and graduate. And so, and I couldn't agree more, Vijay, with the complexity of asynchronous and synchronous. But I think if we keep wrestling with this and trying it in small cohorts, we will get smarter and better and actually share it. There's a reason that MIT shares their curriculum, because it benefits them and it benefits the world. And so I think the world is becoming a lot more connected in the pandemic, and I think we're going to see some real innovation come out of this. Some people call it 2.0, 3.0. I don't really know what version it is, but we're going to be probably in a better place. So.
If I might add something very quickly, regarding how access to minorities and so on, I just want to point people to an announcement today that Morehouse just announced a major partnership with TiE to put their entire undergraduate curriculum online. Frankly, my belief is that online can dramatically increase access and increase equity at the same time for communities that haven't had access to, the Ivy Leagues or, top institutions around the world.
Hey, Anand, if I could pull a thread on that, I know I was going to ask this later, but it seems like the right time. You talked earlier about the explosion of really data now that you have access to and the analytics that you have access to, both in regards to general trends, but maybe even so with communities. Having heard you speak on sort of the corners of the world that are accessing this kind of content now. What are you seeing from that data and the analytics about ability to access, coalescing of networks, student experience, things like that?
First of all, it's important to note that when you use digital learning, you actually have access to massive amounts of data. And this data is routinely used by, in shopping by companies like Amazon, or as you're watching movies by Netflix and others. Why cannot we use digital data for learning, which is a human right? And so there, when you compare that to classroom use, the only data we had was we survey learners. And learners don't even show up to the classroom. So who are you surveying? And the survey bias. But online, you get accurate data. So we are learning just huge amounts from how learners are behaving, how they're learning. I'll give you one example. In a university, we are used to giving a lecture, and I've done that for 30 years at MIT. And then you give them a homework at the end, okay, a week later. And some of them turn it in, some of them don't. You know what we learned online? So Lori Breslau, a researcher at MIT, did the study in my online circuits course on edX, where they looked at how learners were approaching learning. And the videos and learning is available, and the exercise and homeworks are also available all the time. So what they found was at the beginning of the course, learners did what they're used to doing in a course on campus, which is they went and watched the videos, and then they attacked the homeworks. But then as the course progressed, the whole thing flipped. From 80% watching videos first, what happened was 80% towards the end of the course began to attack the homeworks first. And they would look at the exercises and homeworks, and then they would go to the exercises first, and then go to the videos as and when they needed. It completely flipped. And so what is amazing is that using this data is just one example of the amazing ways in which people are learning. And we can talk about these things. Similarly, we are seeing data. I call the data that we have kind of the a particle accelerator for learning. We are seeing what are the times of day when people are accessing learning. Berkeley did an amazing study as to, can you predict dropouts using machine learning? When are people going to leave a course? And then they created interventions working with edX to create notifications to the learners to make them come back. But there are all kinds of things we can do. We have a personalized learning course pilots on edX where we're using adaptive learning and machine learning techniques to enable people to progress at their own speeds. And all of this is in the past few years. Can you just imagine what learning is going to look like as we advance another 10 or 20 years and apply machine learning, AR and VR, learning some cognitive science? I think we're going to take learning to a whole new quantum level.
Vijay, if I could, your discipline, and when we think about, the engineering discipline and sort of the complexity of the physicality in the traditional method by which students have learned, and kind of building on what Anand said also, but what you said earlier, how do you sort of see that challenge being addressed with the need for this physicality and access for the kind of collaboration that typically happens in that discipline?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I mean, I think it's a logical, I mean, I can try to tell you some of the challenges, and I think each of these challenges represents an opportunity. I think one challenge I already alluded to, this is the obvious one. It's really hard to run labs remotely. Now, you can do it, you can send, and this is what we do. We have kits that we ship out to students. Students do experiments at home. And definitely we can reach out to a broad constituency. But if you think about more sophisticated experiments, you think about designing, building, testing, that's really hard to do in an online setting. And so to me, that's an opportunity that's well worth investing in, and something that I think educational institutions are thinking about. I think the bigger thing is, I go back to research institutions and what they're good at. They're good at coming up with new ideas. And a lot of time coming up with the new ideas involves connecting the dots. And connecting the dots relies on finding those dots, which means you rely a lot on having these sporadic interactions across campus. So we were talking a little bit before the recording started on why I'm still at Penn. I think Penn, one of the great attractions to me is that there are 12 schools, and the density of intellectual talent is just incredible. So that means if I take a walk, metaphorically go to the water cooler, the chances of interacting with somebody from a different discipline and coming up with a new idea are pretty high. In a virtual world, we schedule Zoom meetings for everything. And if there's anything we know about Zoom is that you can't find your way to the wrong Zoom meeting in an efficient way. You're given a link and you go there and you know exactly what that meeting is about. We lead very scripted lives. And that's what this culture has created us. On the other hand, if you look at a lot of new ideas, they come out of these chance interactions and cross-cultural connections. And I just worry that we're missing that. So in the short term, we'll do just fine because we've already built partnerships, we have the ideas, we're taking them forward. And if I don't know something about, let's say, the latest mRNA platform technology, I know who to connect to and I can reach out to that person. But how do I know that it is that mRNA platform technology that I need for developing a vaccine? That relies on some preconditioning, some knowledge which I might not have. And so I do believe we're missing out on that. And over the long term, we cannot continue like this.
And I would add to what Vijay is saying is another trend in higher education is interdisciplinary, right? That it's not going to be siloed like it was. Like I was saying earlier, it's not about just majoring in one area or one discipline. But if universities are going to play a role to help the global society address complex challenges, and as Vijay said, research universities produce this knowledge, and then now you have to produce this knowledge. You need people from different schools, different departments to come together to address these issues. And the same thing for students. They, you know, why does somebody has to major in whatever mechanical engineering? I want to major in poverty, solving poverty issues. I want to major in something related to climate change, right? And so I have to pick up courses from many different areas, and that water cooler kind of interaction that happens, it's much more difficult, as everyone is saying, in an online platform. But again, the online works really well for certain things, and then you need that social interaction for other things.
Just one sentence to follow up on what Reena said. She's absolutely right. If you look at all the grand challenges that we face today, they are not solved by a single major, a single department, not even a single school. So I think that's the culture we live in, and we have to somehow nurture the strong cross-cultural currents to solve some of these big challenges. And she mentioned one of them, climate. I think that's the biggest one we're looking at.
Absolutely. And actually, there was a thread I wanted to pull there about the business model, right? And sort of, again, these it's a portfolio approach, right? When we think about the grand challenges, when we think about as a nation and a globe, that the things that we have to address, it would be, I'd love to hear your viewpoints on, and maybe starting with you, Reena, just with your finance background, on the business models that are evolving, and in particular, how a university ecosystem or multiple universities start to rethink the way they're doing CapEx type stuff and investment infrastructure, and even all the investments and costs that go to student experience. And is that being relooked at aggressively at this point, across that ecosystem?
Yeah, it really is being looked at, and higher ed is getting more creative with it. We focus a lot on the curriculum, but there's actually a lot more, right? I think of the potential student that we want to attract. What can we do to give them a virtual feel for the university that they're going to be attracted to come to Georgetown? So you start off with potential students. Then you think about current students. There is the curriculum, but how can you help them with their career-related decisions? How can you help them with experiential learning, right? All of that is very valuable in the world today. it's not exactly inside the classroom, but these outside the classroom kinds of activities. So how businesses that can come to universities and make a case for how we can be helpful, and you have to think about how can you monetize it. But then there's the whole public-private partnership, building dorms, sharing space with companies, parking, energy uses. Higher ed is also becoming big in terms of sustainability and green buildings. And I think we can't do it ourselves. So we need that public-private partnerships to make this happen. So there's a real opportunity in terms of businesses of different kinds working, just like Frank and his portfolio companies are working with universities to look at these opportunities. In the short run, the challenge is going to be, I think our state universities, our public universities have been hit pretty hard. The states have been hit pretty hard from a budgetary point of view. And private universities have had their own challenges. So in some ways, there are opportunities that you have to rely on these partnerships even more.
I would add just a quick thought to that. I think it's very important for universities to play a very important role here. And certainly, Georgetown, Penn, MIT are all at the forefront of doing this, because my biggest fear is that if we don't do something as universities, for-profits can be very nimble and very quick, and they go for what can potentially create the highest revenue. For-profits, you won't see many for-profits offering online degrees in boutique areas of the sciences or boutique areas of the arts. The online degrees are offered in the most, what shall I say, revenue generating programs. And so there's a real danger, and which is why it's important for universities to take a role here. And one of the things that we do at edX as a nonprofit, we work with our university partners, and just as Hulu is wholly owned by Walt Disney and NBC, similarly, edX is a consortium of university partners. We're a nonprofit, enabling universities to put their content and online programming at the forefront. So, as an example, we have multiple programs. So, for example, we have an MBA from Boston University on edX for about $24,000. So these are just some examples of ways in which universities can partner and stay at the forefront so as not to be disenfranchised by the more nimble for-profits.
If I could just add to that, I think that there's the obvious pressure to reduce tuition, which has built over the last 10, 12 years. So I don't know how many of you know this, but Penn is the largest private institution that guarantees financial aid for everybody who qualifies. This puts a huge pressure on our financial system. So 1 in 7 students coming in are first-generation college students, and we support them. So this was already the case before the pandemic, and this was for undergraduate students. That has accelerated. And it has accelerated and gone beyond undergraduate students to master's students. So in some sense, to do it properly at high quality, and by the way, even online, our degree programs, we have a 12.5 to 1 instructor to student ratio. I'm sorry, student to instructor ratio. That's really hard to do. So to do it efficiently, I think all of the things that we talked about, modular, stackable, scalable, and customizable, but do it at scale. I think this calls for new approaches to how you deliver education. But again, to me, that's the opportunity, because you cannot do that on campus. You have to do it online. And I think any successful university going forward will have some mix of programs that are completely online and programs that are completely on campus. It's just hard for me to imagine doing everything on campus.
Absolutely. So we're getting pretty close to time. I hate to turn this off, but I want to make sure the audience has a chance to get their questions answered. And so I was thinking just maybe 1 minute each. The audience is comprised of entrepreneurs and educators and administrators, government people, and most of us overlap as parents also. So as we walk away from this conversation, I was thinking if each of you could just give us one area that if you wanted this ecosystem that's listening to you to look to address, what would that be? And so Rena, if you don't mind, I'll start with you again.
Sure. So we've talked about challenges and opportunities. I've got to leave on a very positive note and say higher ed in the US is still really, really strong, right? So whether you are parents, potential students, or entrepreneurs, there are just great opportunities. And one size shoe doesn't fit all. And think about what you want to do and how you want to interact with higher ed. And we're living longer, and this is not going to be about a 4-year degree, a 1-year degree, a 2-year master's degree. This is going to be lifelong learning. So come at it from a long-term view, and education is definitely worth it.
Thank you, Rena. VJ?
I'm going to go off script here. You asked me what's the most important thing on my mind, or something along those lines, and of course it has to do with education. But I think the biggest challenge that we face is really having to do with climate change, energy, sustainability, and the trifecta of these things. And to wit, Stanford just started a new school in this area. And why do I pick this particular subject for this discussion? Because this is a subject that doesn't fit cleanly into any one school, any one department. Yes, there's technology underlying somewhere. That's why I'm interested as an engineer. But really, it brings together social scientists, behavioral economists, policymakers, and it's truly a global challenge. I think something that we can all rally around. And so if you go and look online for MOOCs in this area, they're not very compelling. And I think to me, there's a real opportunity. Anant, I'm sure you'll disagree with me, but I think to me, this is something that this generation cares deeply about. And I think if we, as I'll speak for myself, 50-something-year-old people, don't do something about it, I think would have betrayed this next generation. It's so something I think we need to work on. And again, it's all about access and making it available to as many students as possible, not just in the US, but internationally. And I think that's something that's been exaggerated by COVID. In some sense, it's united us, and it's amplified the call to action on climate.
Totally agree. Thank you. Anand.
I fell into the trap. I was muted again. This was such a fascinating conversation, and there's so much to talk about. By the way, we do have some amazing courses on climate and sustainability from the United Nations SDG Academy. It's the UN SDG Academy that has those programs. But the thought I want to leave you with is, many of you listening in and part of this discussion are parents. You also work at companies, you're entrepreneurs. I think ultimately, revolution, change, transformation will happen at universities if the consumers of graduates make their voices heard. Today at companies, companies are still looking for full traditional degrees. How about companies sending a signal that you will pay attention to modular stackable programs? You will look at skills that people have developed. It's very important for you to get that message across that you believe it's important. It's also very important for you to focus on lifelong learning and the continued upskilling and reskilling of employee bases, and sort of think of a combination of your usual training, but combine that with online learning as well, because the future is going to be blended. So I'll just leave you with these two quick thoughts.
Thank you. Frank?
Couldn't agree more with everyone, and honored to be on with you all. It's really such an important time to think about what's on the other side. To survive our day to day and stay healthy and be civil. In venture capital and in startups, we talk about the J curve. We talk about the ability to take on risk, to run in the red, which is not a great territory to be in from a financial perspective, but there's a bit of a metaphor there. I think what anyone who's on today listening to this should take away is that when there is opportunity, dare it in the face and grab a hold of it and take the challenge that it is. Don't play it safe. You got to pay your bills. You got to take care of each other. But at the end of the day, aim big and be comfortable going into the J curve. Higher education, rightfully so, provides a bit of a platform for you to fail. And if that's what you're wanting to go through, then be comfortable with some failure, and you learn much more from that than you would playing it safe.
Thank you, Frank, and then thank you, Rena, Vijay, Anand. This has been an amazing conversation. I know we're going to get to some Q&A, but before that, just once again, thank you for all the time that you've given us today and all the wisdom, and looking forward to acting upon it as an industry, frankly. So with that, we'll start taking some questions and come right back at you. Thank you. Okay, great. So I know we're getting close on time, and what I was thinking is there are a couple of threads and trends that are in the Q&A, some that are visible, but I have some others that came in by text. So maybe with Anand and Rena, there's a thread around online coursework potentially being a prerequisite for admissions, and how it does break some of the socioeconomic barriers and geographic barriers. And yet also some questions around the potential inequitability that might be playing out even more so with online versus the learning that happens in face-to-face interaction. So maybe Anand, if you could go first, and then Rena, just transition to you on that thread.
Sure. On the note of there being more of a blend between online and on-campus education, and where the online work is either meant as a prerequisite or as an aid to admissions. We are seeing much more of that today than ever before. Just as an example, the MIT undergraduate application form asks you what online courses you've taken, from MIT on edX, and students are asked to list that, and they've been doing this for about 8 years now. We also have MicroMasters programs where if people complete MicroMasters, they can apply for admission into a master's degree, and the master's degree could be online or on campus. And the performance of the students in their online program is very heavily considered for their admission into the full-on master's degree. So that is happening. We've also launched a master's degree from Arizona State University in supply chain management from the business school, where the first part of it is an online MicroMasters from MIT in supply chain. And then that is used as a prerequisite into the full online degree and master's in supply chain. So it's happening quite a bit.
Yes, I kind of see two issues here in terms of inequity that we realized with COVID. One was some of our students not having access to good internet, right? Or the right situation at home to be able to attend classes. But I think we're trying to figure out how to make that part work. And if that part is working, I really see that we're talking about stackable and modular courses and education being delivered in a different format. That should actually help students from a racial inequity point of view, and not just in one country, right? Now you can be a student in any country, and you can have the best faculty from any country. I think that's another really good thing that has happened, that there is great education being provided by so many universities across the world that the students can benefit from by being online. So I hope some of these things will actually get addressed in a more positive way.
Good, thank you. And then we're going to run out of time. We will definitely try to answer all the questions and maybe give it as a follow-up. But I'd like to close maybe with Vijay. There's a couple of threads on not only the statements you made about climate change, sustainability, and sort of the grand challenge, and then on the earlier panel discussion with the two presidents, George Mason and Virginia Tech are very actively engaged in sort of building out innovation districts, and sort of this history we have of bringing students, faculty, and corporations together to solve some of these challenges. Could you speak to that ecosystem in the context of blended learning, what you're seeing in Philly, and other places? You're muted, Vijay, I think.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was on the wrong microphone, which I don't know where it was directed to. Sorry about that. So on the question of climate, energy, and sustainability, I do believe, as I said before, is the most pressing challenge we face. And again, I'll go back to, we've been talking about lowering the barrier to entry for students, but I also think it's an opportunity for us to lower the barrier to entry to start new programs. The overhead in starting something new is relatively modest. Plus, I can reach out to world experts on carbon sequestration, on climate change, on storage technologies, and bring them into the same classroom. I think that is an opportunity. It doesn't have to be by school, it doesn't have to be by department, it doesn't even have to be by university. So to me, there's a really big opportunity which platforms like edX have unleashed. So that's something we should work on. In terms of the question on entrepreneurship and bringing people together, I don't know in what context it was addressed, but nearly every university now, I think, has recognized the importance of nurturing talent and building an ecosystem. So for example, at Penn, we have the very appropriately named Pennovation. I know at MIT, they have the engine. I'm sorry, I don't know enough about George Mason, but every university tries to do this. And it's the recognition that it's not about new ideas. It's not even about capital. It's all about talent. So if you nurture the talent, opportunities will come to them. And of course, if you have talent plus good ideas, money will come to you. So I think this is a very, very important thing. And the online world can only help. Once again, I worry a little bit about the sort of the serendipitous interactions that happen and discoveries that happen. But I do believe the online world, and we've seen this very successfully conducted competitions completely online. I think it is an opportunity, and as many of you have pointed out before, it allows people from across the world to participate in an opportunity, let's say on the MIT campus, which to me is really remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, I think what I heard there is innovation districts historically might have been very centered in Cambridge or Austin or Research Triangle Park and others that are well known, Silicon Valley. This may be opening it up for a much broader collaboration. So, I'm kind of getting the signals that we need to wrap up. I once again want to thank all of you for the time. We still have some questions unanswered, so we may reach out to you and hopefully get some of your answers, and then we can put that out as a follow-up. But at this point, I'd like to hand it back over to Cindy for closing.
Well, thanks a lot, Sumit, for moderating this awesome session. And thank you so much, starting with Reena, Anand, Vijay, and Frank, for taking your valuable time. I know we ran into some logistic issues here, so special thanks for accommodating this recording so you can still come in and answer all the questions live here. So deeply appreciated. So just one thing, as a parent, I'm actually walking away with a lot of clarity, I'm sure, like others. And looking at the lens of an entrepreneur, definitely based on what Vijay said, great opportunities to come up with remote labs, or be it from Reena's perspective in private-public partnerships. I think a lot of opportunities are emerging. So with that, I wanted to once again thank you and thank the audience for being here. As always, we look forward to your feedback. You'll be getting a survey very shortly. So we'll listen to that and see how best we can tweak and offer you better content and better programs going forward. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.